based off of the survey results we get. So, what is CTE, Career and Technical Education? If you look at the screen, you'll see on the left a picture of a vocational education classroom that I'm sure if some of you would raise your hand, you've sat in those classes, right? Back in the day, it was wood shop, it was auto, it was metals, and it was home economics. And so the old vocational education that we're familiar with has now had a facelift, and it's called Career and Technical Education. And in that facelift, it's also expanded its programming options, right? To healthcare, to business, to just all various sectors of the economy. So whether it was in the past or currently happening today, still teaching students real-world, hands-on skills to prepare them for their future. So here's the definition, the technical definition of CTE. You will see words that are emboldened on this screen, and that's on purpose because those are really some of the central pillars. So you'll see career technical education, quality educational programs, academic content, post-secondary and workforce readiness, technical skills, education or employment. My favorite word on this screen is the word or, because we're happy to prepare students either for college or the workforce, or both, really. Innovation Center. So the other part of that goal that we read was Innovation Center. Well, what's Innovation Center? Again, we've emboldened some words on this slide. Career preparation facilities, relevant work-based learning opportunities, meaningful coursework, hands-on experiences, transcend learning. These are campuses where students attend for all or part of their day to really engage deeply into learning from a CTE standpoint. So what you'll see on the screen there, and if you remember back to that timeline I've shown, we went on several tours. These are tours that we've gone on of different campuses. On the left, you'll see a healthcare suite. These are actual hospital beds and hospital technology that students were learning healthcare in. You'll see in the middle an aviation pathway. We were standing outside of an airplane at that point, and they were working on mechanics. And on the right, you'll see a robotics field that was set up in one of the facilities. And as awkward as it is, I don't just take pictures of programming, I also take pictures of infrastructure. And so at each of every one of the facilities we went to, you can bet they had high ceilings, lots of access, great power, ventilation, and air compression. So these are just some of those pictures that I took when we went on those tours. And so with that background information, I'm going to pass it on to Ms. Amber Wetstein, our interim superintendent, acting superintendent, that's what it is.
Good evening, everyone. My comments are brief, but I wanted to orient you to our district strategic plan because we always like to reference this in any conversation that we're having with our community, and really our focus this evening is around priority 2 of the board's strategic plan, which is academic excellence, because when we think about having an excellent education for every student every day, it goes way beyond reading, writing, math, social studies, and science. While all of those things are important, they're really embedded in all of the programming that Mrs. McAllister has been referencing this evening. And honing in a little bit on the timeline that Jessica showed you earlier, this is really the current work that we're doing, the current and recent work that our board has been engaged in. And so in January, and you'll hear a little bit about this at the end of the presentation, we launched the Enterprise, which is a startup version of some of these programs that we'll be talking about this evening. We also took the board on a tour of our current CTE classrooms. And as you know now, we have pursued a facility to help launch even more opportunities for our students. And here we are this evening engaging with you, and you'll have an opportunity to provide feedback throughout the evening.
Hello, I'm Brett Ridgway, Chief Business Officer for the district, and I'll just give a few background pieces as well so we really get to the meat of the presentation here. My role is really in terms of the how, the when, and the where in terms of this project. And from my perspective, the project really started back last summer when I ran into Senator Lundeen over here at Arlene's at lunch, and he and I got to talking. I said, hey, I have an idea about how to release captive fund balance around the state. And so he really grasped onto it, which we appreciated very much. And we worked through the course of the fall to plan legislation. And if those of you know the legislative process, that's really when the real work gets done, is in the fall before the session starts in January. And so he worked with us to help do that, what became Senate Bill 2417, and freed up it'll end up freeing up $8.5 million for District 38, and it'll free up about another $650 million around the state for this purpose. And that was achieved by just retiming the payment of state share around the payment of local share instead of doing it over equal payments throughout the year. So that really gives the opportunity to free up the captive fund balance and create the opportunity. When we started to see that that was really gaining some traction, and of course it made it through the state legislature with one no vote out of all the 100 legislators. Some person, I won't divulge, I don't even really know. Someone from Pueblo, so who knows. So when that was looking good, and it was really looking good throughout the course of spring, then we said, then we can look to that next step. What the next step of where might this happen? And so we worked with Commissioner Real Estate Agent and say, let's start looking at properties within our boundaries. And of course, this being a great, beautiful community, there's not a lot of manufacturing space and warehouse space in this area. So there's really one property that came available, and so we were able to look at that on the very first day that it came on the market, and work with that current ownership group, and really they got really excited about the ideas that we were presenting to them as well. We also wanted to do this all in the terms of handling our normal business and continue to improve how we're handling our normal business. Making sure that we are attentive to our capital maintenance items and continuing which I forgot the rest of that sentence, the improvement, the progress that we're making in that regard. And so we're doing that well. We're improving compensation through operational funds. We're certainly not losing ground. We're not gaining a whole lot of ground to competing districts, but we're not losing ground either, which is great. And we also have a lot of clarity with staff, with the community, with the Board of Education on how we go through that process. And moving towards student-based financial management, student-based budgeting, which will give us a really good opportunity in the future to determine how funds are following students, where they're going to schools, with programs that they're getting involved in. So the opportunity presented itself again that very first day that it went on the market, that J-Bill building. We were able to touch base and make contact with the sellers, the current property owners. If you know, that's over on Cynthia's Drive. And so we were able to really engage on that quickly. And from their perspective, just so you know, J-Bill has a much larger facility across the street from that location, so they were able to do some consolidation and really free up that. J-Bill is not the one who owns this building currently. There's another owner. They were leasing it from the current owner. And so because J-Bill was getting ready to leave that space, then the owner said, well, this is a good time for consider selling out on that. So again, they were really enthused about that, and so we became a preferred partner for them, and we were able to pursue into a contract phase with that facility.
Okay, this is back to me again. So I just am going to make a quick transition and say, I mentioned before that we had gone on several tours. These are just some of the other innovation campuses, CTE facilities around the state. This is not an exhaustive list. But you can see that they're already in operation. And the other thing I'd like to say about that is that there are a lot of discussions like this happening in communities all around the Front Range because it's an important thing in our community. What I will say is each of these is different. What you might look at as you start to kind of dive into, if you were interested, some of them have cosmetology programs, some of them have cabinetry, some of them have healthcare, and the way they determine what they're going to offer is based off of local economic data. And so with that, I'd like to pass both the clicker and the microphone to Dr. Tatiana Bailey from Data-Driven Economic Strategies.
Thank you so much, and thank you for taking your time on a beautiful Colorado evening to give us your feedback, because like Jess said, it's really, really important to inform the community and then to understand what you think once you have some of this information. So I'm going to jump right in and give you some labor market information and how it ties to the really local, state, and national economies. So for any of you who follow just basically what's happening in the economy. We had a huge surge, as you can see with that red line, post-COVID, right, for job openings. And then the black line shows you the trend. We're kind of back to trend level growth. In terms of the number of job openings. But it's been kind of a surprise to a lot of economists and finance people that the job market has stayed as robust as it has. So for instance, in April, which is the latest data available, there were 8.1 million job openings. In 2019, if you juxtapose the number of openings to the number of people who can participate in the labor force, you end up with this ratio, right? And that's about 0.8, okay? So that basically translates into, in 2019, the US had 0.8 available workers per open position. And during the pandemic, that got really skewed, as little as 0.4 or 0.5 available workers. But now we're kind of back to the same level, 0.8. And that's actually a good thing, that things are normalizing. And, partially because of that, the unemployment rate is really low. So you can see here, it's April data because it's that way we can look at also state and local. But you can see in the U.S. in April, it was 3.5% unemployment rate, Colorado a little bit lower, and El Paso County at 3.5% as well. And just so you know, the sort of normal, according to economists and looking at data, backwards, is about 4 to 4.5%. Unemployment rate. And why is that? That's just kind of people moving from job to job normally, right? Or moving out of state or whatever the case may be. So we're still at a really low unemployment rate. Now, what about the percentage of people who were participating in the labor force? Well, that is also going to play very much into this, and that's the red line there, and that's what we call the civilian labor participation rate. You can see if we go back to 2005, it's been steadily declining, and it did take a hit after the Great Recession, and we never really fully recovered from that. And even with the most recent available data in May of 2024, you can see that we're still subpar. So why are not more people participating in the labor force? That's clearly going to play into the skills gap and into the labor force shortage. But if you add all of these numbers, people who are working part-time, who would like to work full-time, or maybe they're saying they'd like to work, but childcare is too expensive, whatever the case may be, good on cue right there. 12.6 million people who could be working in the labor force, who say that they would like to. Now, some people are not included in the statistic, like, me for a while when my kids were really young. I said I didn't want to participate in the labor force, so I wouldn't even be counted in this. These are individuals who say if I had the right skill set, if I had affordable childcare, if I could work full-time and so forth. But that's still really low, okay? A lot of underutilized labor, and it adds up to about 12.6 million people. I've always been curious as an economist, how does this compare to other developed countries? Because I thought that's kind of odd. Why does our participation rate keep going down? I mean, I know we're aging, but I think there's more going on. And if you look at the top right there, the civilian participation rate for ages 25 to 54, prime working ages, if you will, we're the black line, and we're below, clearly, Germany, Canada, the United Kingdom, and Australia. These are some peer nations. There's something else is going on here. And I'll tell you my bias right up front. Part of it, not all of it, but part of it is the skills gap. There are a lot of people who are surveyed in the United States who say, if I had the right skill set and I could make a little more money, it would be worth it to work or work full time. Now, the other chart at the bottom right shows you where are we going with this. So the Bureau of Labor Statistics looks at all this data, all the surveys that they do on a monthly basis, and also demographics. And you can see that the labor participation rate in the bottom right is not projected to improve. The gray line takes you out to 2032. So you have the total rate, the rate for 20 to 24, 25 to 54, and so forth. It's not getting any better. In fact, it's still declining to some extent. So as an economist, I can tell you that's a problem. Parents and community members, businesses, we all agree that is something that needs to be looked at carefully and ameliorated. And then what about El Paso County? So these are the same forecasts I showed you, but for El Paso County. Now the top right shows you these declines are also happening, but look at despite our younger age. So again, something else is going on. The median age in El Paso County is 35 versus Colorado at 37.6, and the U.S. is at about 39. So we are a younger state and a younger region, and yet our labor participation rates are still projected to decline over the next roughly 9-10 years. And then this just shows you labor participation by state. And you can see that the U.S. overall, 77%. Colorado is a little higher at 80% and a half. Any ideas on why we would have a higher labor participation rate in the state of Colorado? Well, higher labor participation, yeah, I mean, you got to work, that's true. But it's typically tied to the level of education. We are the second most educated state in the nation. More educated you are, the more likely you are to participate in the labor force. And that doesn't always have to be a 4-year degree or a master's or a PhD. It just also can mean a skill set in a high demand field. And then this one shows you the same information by county. And it's a little hard to see, but if you look at Colorado, look at the Front Range. It's the darker blue, right? And again, that's because we have a lot of educated people in our region. Now, the interesting thing, look at this one with the male labor participation rate. A lot of the declines, in fact, most of the declines that we've been seeing in the labor participation rate over the last several years, at least the last 2 decades, is tied to the male labor participation rate. So you can see in the U.S., 82%, Colorado at almost 86%, and El Paso County a little bit lower. Now, I think there are some other things going on in the data there, but this really ties to this next slide and something that I talk a lot about. I've done a lot of segments and articles on this. And this is looking at the male labor participation rate in the upper left from 2008 to 2023, and you can see the decline there. It's been quite marked. Now, why? Well, there's a lot of research on this. Fewer manufacturing jobs, I think we've all heard about that. That decline kind of started in the 1960s, and those were a lot of the livable wage jobs that males had back in the 40s, 50s, and so forth. The men ages 35 to 44 today entered the workforce during the Great Recession, had trouble getting into the workforce, and that specific cohort hasn't done as well participating in the labor force. And a lot of those, especially middle and lower skill males, also lost their jobs during the pandemic, particularly the low-skilled jobs, right? So it was hard for those individuals to find their first job, or they lost their first job. Then also shifting norms for child rearing and men as a head of household. This isn't necessarily all bad. As women have gotten more educated, sometimes you have men participating less in the labor force. In the 90s, there was also a war on crime and incarceration, and once those individuals, our incarceration rate went way up during that time. Once a lot of those individuals were released, they had a hard time entering the labor force as well. And then, the obvious elephant in the room, costs a lot of money to go to college. And the more expensive that has gone or has, resulted in lower post-secondary enrollment. And I'll show you more on that a little bit. So my kind of takeaway on this, doesn't it make a lot of sense to subsidize, if you put all this together, some high-demand occupational training? And that's, I think, a lot of what we're talking about tonight. And then, the other sort of startling statistic tied to this, if you look on the right there in that text box, in 1950, 1 in 50 men were not participating in the labor force, and this is for prime working ages. Today is 1 in 9 in the United States. So it's a pretty marked difference. Now, one piece of good news for El Paso County is that you can see around the time leading up into the Great Recession, the middle gray bar, and for several years after, there was about a 10-year period. We have about 10,000 new people moving into our area every year, and then look at how the labor participation rate stayed pretty much the same. So we were really kind of falling further behind. But then around 2014, 2015, Mayor Suthers always says it's around the time he became mayor, and I say it's around the time I moved here. But it's really, it's an alchemy of good things that happen. But look at how that labor participation rate really started to improve. So I think there's great stuff going on. It's kind of just taking it to the next level. Now, let's dig into just a little bit of the data here. So one of the things that we do in looking at this, besides my day job as an economist, I have a lot of interest in workforce development, because if people have jobs, it just is this virtuous cycle, right? I mean, families do well, individuals do well, businesses do well, we do well competitively, globally, and so forth. So why not look at this data and help provide really good, detailed information for kids and families and so forth on what the top demanded occupations are, right? So here you can see, this is for the state of Colorado, just to give you a landscape. And I know the writing is a little bit small here, but in 2023, you can see like the top demanded one, not a big surprise, right? Registered nurse. But you also see software developers, you see managers, salespeople, truck drivers. There's quite a mix. And if you pull out the common themes there on the left, you can see it's healthcare. Ton of healthcare positions, right? We're an aging population. We consume a lot of healthcare. Software development, TDL, which is trade, distribution, and logistics. That's like truck drivers, freight movers. Think of Amazon and so forth. Hospitality-related jobs, and certainly a plethora of skills here. Now, I have to give kudos to D38. You guys are in really, really good hands here, because they reached out. They're very interested in this information and looking at it carefully. And we're also working closely with about 3 other school districts. So I was thrilled when Lewis Palmer stepped forward. So they said, well, let's look at El Paso County and Douglas counties. That's kind of our catchment area. Let's do the same data pulls, but let's look at these specific 2 counties. And here again, you can see we have retail jobs, healthcare jobs, you have software developers, computer systems engineers, and so forth. And again, common themes are very similar to the state of Colorado, with a lot in computer and mathematical, especially software, a lot of sales and food prep, a lot of office, admin, and management type jobs, healthcare, and again, TDL, trade distribution, and logistics. Here we can also juxtapose all of the same information, but with salaries. And that's what you have on the dots there. So, again, you can start to be informed, even as a parent, to look at this and say, well, I'm interested in this field. These 3 or 4 occupations fall into that, these top 30 or top 50, however you want to look at it. And this is how much the median salary is. Across our region, which is pretty close to the U.S. Our region's salaries are a tiny bit lower, but they're slowly catching up. And then you can also pull employers and look at what the top employers are. Again, so kids can even look at this and say, well, I know that I want to work in this field, and here are maybe some of the websites I can get on and actually look at this data. Then you can also do the same data pull, but for software skills. This is, really, really important, even before all of the hype before AI. But here you can see the first 5, I guess, are Microsoft Office, Microsoft Excel, PowerPoint, Outlook, Word, and this tells me that, some of those baseline skills, these have been here for many, many years. Look at the next one, Python, which is really interesting. One of the things that we've been trying to dig further and further into, how much of AI is hype? How much of it is, really, truly foundational and taking sort of the computer revolution to the next level, right? Well, if we're going to be talking schools, we really need to know, what types of skill sets are needed, especially related to coding and so forth. And one of the common themes that we've been finding out is that Python is one of the simplest. It's teachable in high schools. You can get a good certification and look at, I mean, if you follow the dot, the starting salary is, about 140 for someone with Python certification, right? With that skill. And then the other important part of that is that most of what I am reading and understanding is that Python is the most nimble of the languages, meaning that it's probably going to be the foundational one for AI moving forward. But again, you can see here C++, SQL. These are very specific, but they really are a roadmap, right, for the types of software training that is needed. And then here you can also see the top demanded certifications. They tie very much to the skills, right, and the occupations that we were talking about. So, a registered nurse needs a certification. You'll see a lot of DoD-related, security-related certifications in our region and in the state and so forth. And again, the associated salaries. And then this one is kind of interesting as well, soft skills. So many employers, and this is all from Lightcast, which is a huge national database that does a sweep of all the job openings, they also see a lot of commonalities in the soft skills that employers are asking for, and talking a lot with school administrators in terms of how do you also build at the same time these types of skills, which I think maybe some of us older people in the room kind of take for granted, but it's something that's really important that a lot of employers are saying is lacking now and could be a bit better. And then this is going back to Colorado, and I just want to show you here that all advertised educational qualifications. So you can also say, okay, show me how many postings are requiring a bachelor's degree or higher, how many an associate's degree, and so forth. And this is what economists call a barbell economy, because you can see the top bar says high school or vocational training. That has a whole lot of job openings. And then the next one that has a whole lot is bachelor's degree. So it's kind of telling us that bachelor's degree is still super high demand, nothing wrong with those, with that type of education, but also some type of a vocational training, or even within CTE, even within junior and senior year, there are a lot of jobs out there as well that are only requiring that. And often that's a gateway, right, for additional training anyway. And then the bottom right, I just want to show you that it's interesting. 2017, right? Not that long ago, just a few years. The orange bar shows you how many postings do not require a degree versus the blue one that does. The postings do require a bachelor's degree. Look at how it flip-flopped by 2021. I often bring up the example of Delta Airlines very recently saying, we're just going to pull out educational requirements for all of our job postings. Again, not to say that it's not important, but to me, it opens an opportunity. It certainly opens an opportunity for kids to have some additional training while they're in school, right? And kind of let them have their cake and eat it too, is the way I see it. It's just a win-win-win. And then, the last important piece of this data part, I think, is looking at what is the Bureau of Labor Statistics and what are experts saying about the top demanded occupations moving forward, the projections, right? This one shows you the fastest growing occupations between 2022 and 2032 rate, meaning percentage increase, okay? So here you can see wind turbine technicians, nurse practitioners, data scientists, and so forth. And again, juxtaposing the median salaries. So that is by rate, growth rate. So you can see, for instance, wind turbine technician is 45% growth rate, okay? And then here, this is the same information, but by the number of new jobs. So this is the absolute number. So again, you see a lot of commonalities here: home health, personal aid care, and software developers, nurses, laborers, cooks, all kinds of different skill sets out here as well. Truck drivers and so forth. And again, juxtaposing that to the median pay. And then the last piece, I just want to kind of put a reality check, if you will. Why is it? Why is it that it's so hard for so many families to send their kids to college now? And, again, agreeing that it's a good thing, but there is a reality of student debt now that is about 1.7 trillion, 43 million borrowers. That's more than credit card debt. It surpassed credit card debt, I think, about a year ago. That amount has tripled since just 2007, but we finally did see some decline in student loan debt in 2023, and that's, of course, mostly because of the student forgiveness, loan forgiveness. The average amount now is $37,000 for all federal student loan borrowers, $52,000 for Black borrowers, so significantly higher. If you include private schools, it's about $40,000 as the average debt. 61% of college grads now have student debt, so it's pretty ubiquitous, right? 6% right now are in default, which is historically a little bit on the high side, and I'm watching that because, again, a lot of the programs, there's a hiatus right now until the end of this year in terms of putting it on credit reports. And then, astoundingly, the graduation rate is lower than 2/3. It's 62%. And that's when you do the weighted average between public and private universities. And that's the graduation rate by the 6th year. So that's not a great graduation rate for college. Just, and what concerns me is that you have a lot of kids with debt and no degree. And that's kind of the worst scenario, right? Because then they attend for a year or two and they've taken out student loans, but they haven't gotten the actual degree. And then, I think all of this kind of tells us that education definitely needs some reform and innovation. And then this just shows you, since 2003, the percentage change in household debt by category. So you've got mortgage debt, auto loan, and so forth. Well, no surprise, the purple line is student debt. So that goes to show you how much college has increased in price and the debt load that this has resulted in. And then, the historical enrollment that I was talking about earlier, going back all the way to 1970 up until 2020 is the most recent data available from the National Center for Education. But you can see here, despite the fact that our population, is still increasing by 6.5%, you can see that enrollment is actually declining. So, that, again, it's a bad news thing, but it's also potentially an opportunity in terms of some other types of training that we can give. So in conclusion, I personally very much believe, and that's why I invest time and energy into this, that investments in career pathways and thoughtful workforce development are worthwhile and pay for themselves, right? They're not just a good idea, they pay for themselves. Increasing labor participation, which increases the tax base. It lowers transfer payments. The more people you have working, the fewer people you have on Medicaid and food stamps and so forth. There's good data to support also lower incarceration rates. When you lower student debt, it stimulates the economy. If you have fewer people with student debt or less debt, they can afford a house. They are more active consumers in society. Meet business needs, enabling them to expand and further contribute to the U.S. economy and, of course, global competitiveness. And it raises the standard of living and opportunity set for our residents, and it's doable. So with that, I'll stop. I think, are we doing Q&A right away? Okay. So any questions on the presentation or on the data? Yes, sir. It does not. That's a good question. Because, that was one of the first things that I looked at, moving from Michigan, just a much larger military presence here. It does not include military. So anyone who is on base is counted through military numbers. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you for talking about both U3 and U6. U3 is the number we see every month on the first Friday from the Fed.
Are you an economist? U6.
Business administration major.
Okay.
And I studied the paper copy back then of the BLS, what is now BLS.gov, table 815 or whatever it is. It has all these U whatevers. And I love U6.
We're recording, just
I thank you for pointing out both U3 and U6. I think U6 is very important.
Just to clarify, U3 is the sort of headline unemployment rate, the one that I showed you earlier, 3.5%. U6 is the other one that I talked about that it includes all of the people who are marginally attached to the labor force, working part-time, but would like full-time, or they say they're actively looking, but they haven't, they don't have the skill set to get into the jobs of today or whatever the case may be. So I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I just wanted to point out U3 is that number that everybody hears about but doesn't associate it with the U3 acronym.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I somewhat downplay the aging population. Clearly, that's part of the equation as well, right? I mean, the baby boomers are now all retiring, so that is definitely part of the equation. But even when you pull that out, the statistics are still pretty stark in terms of the percentage of people who are participating in the labor force. And again, going back to Colorado is a perfect example. If you train people and they have livable wage jobs, they're just that much more likely to participate in the labor force, and that's part of what we're talking about today. Any other questions? Okay.
Okay, so for the green light. So this information is fascinating every single time I hear it. And what I'd like to do is give a little plug for an economic progress report that Dr. Bailey produces every month. And so if this interested you and you'd like to get on her mailing list, let us know and we'll connect you in some way. I already have some hands waving. So it's important it's fascinating information, but it's also really important when we're developing CTE programs, right? Because we need to pay attention to developing programs that are going to be high skill, high wage, and high demand. That's an element of CTE that's really important. So we've been looking at that information for quite some time, and in doing so, we have created programming in areas that you'll see on the screen now. So those that have stars next to them are the programs that we currently offer in our middle school and in both of our high schools. This is the entire way that the Colorado Community College system has organized their programming, and so that translates into this in each of our schools. So you'll see, as I mentioned earlier, that some of our programming does reach down into the middle school, which we're really proud and happy to do. Some of our programming exists at all three schools, some of them at just a couple of high schools, and just kind of all over the place. So we're really proud of the programming that we offer here. And that we can't offer here, we do have really robust partnerships with other entities. So one of them is the International Salon and Spa Academy. We offer cosmetology program for students there. And the other one is Pikes Peak State College. So in that table, you'll see CTE programming that they offer through a program called Career Start. And essentially, when students enroll in Career Start, we transport them down to the Centennial campus, which is at Academy and I-25, South Academy and I-25. And they do some learning, and then we get them back before the end of the day. So that's some of the CTE programming that we have. And we're really deliberate about helping students as they discover what kind of programming might work for them. We do have in our presence today one of our post-secondary counselors who leads some of this work at our high schools. And so there's an acronym called ICAP, and it stands for Individual Career and Academic Planning. And this is a discussion that happens in the middle school, starts in the middle school, and then continues on through their high school experience, really helping them to take some interest surveys, to learn a little bit more about their aptitudes, and then to connect what it is that they're learning about themselves to some real experiences that they can then continue to discover what might be feasible for them. So a lot of that discovery happens in a tool that we're now using called U Science, and it's like the science of you, so YOU Science. Students take a series of assessments, if you will, and they will, at the end of it, extract not only what their interests are, but also what their aptitudes are. We did a lengthy survey trying to find the right tool that we'd like for our students to use, and we landed on U Science because of that aptitude piece. What we found before is that students are usually interested in the things that they experience, so firefighter, in the medical field, or an educator in my family. Well, this actually extracts also what they might be good at. And so that leads to some really amazing, robust conversations with students to then connect with them with programming that they if interest alone they would have never looked into. So through that, we collect a lot of data on our students. We have, which you'll see on the screen in front of you now, color-coded to those Colorado Community College colors that I had shown earlier. And you'll see in the first column, that's the interest that we got from youth science. So I'm gonna let you look at that for just a minute. Basically what that means is that we have a large amount of interest. You'll see in the engineering and technology and media, and you'll also see it in health science. And then when you go to aptitude, you'll see something look a little bit different. So that's just interesting for us, right? That helps us have really intentional conversations with our students. And then the last column is actually the enrollment. So students that are enrolling in our programming. You'll see that there's a very small amount in hospitality, human services, and education, and a very small amount in agriculture, natural resources, and energy. And that's because we don't really have those programs here. Those are programs that they go to Pikes Peak State College to enroll in. I will say we do not have an education CTE program here, but we do support our future educators in different ways that are outside of CTE. And then this comes back to some of the summary that we'd like to have.
Yeah, so, the feedback part of this is a survey that we intentionally kept pretty short. As just mentioned, it's only open for, I guess, about a week and a half, 10 days. And so there's going to be a QR code. If there's anyone else who you'd like to share that with, have them fill it out too, because the more feedback, the better, right? And really what this comes down to is, think about all the data I showed you. Think about what just showed you in terms of, aptitude and interest and so forth. And, try to create this table, and, I know it's a lot of information, but I think you'll get it. Given the presentations we just gave you. So for instance, across the top you have the occupational categories, okay? Those are sort of the buckets that are provided through the Bureau of Labor Statistics. And then under that we have some examples of what's included in the top 50 demanded occupations, okay? So, this list could have gone on, but what we wanted to give you are examples just from the top 50 to help inform. Now, in the survey that you're gonna hopefully fill out for us, there's an other line, so you're not bound by just these, but this can be the information to help guide you, okay, based on the information that we've given you. So for instance, for management, under that bucket, there's medical and health services managers, sales managers, general and operations managers, and what do the colors designate? Well, if it happens to be in purple, that's on that projection slide. In other words, it's part of the high number of new jobs, okay? So it's not just highly demanded today in El Paso and Douglas counties, it's also projected to have high growth moving forward. And then, for instance, you can see in business and finance, actuaries, which is part of the accounting field, that's a green one, and that's, again, a projected, but for high growth rate, okay? So percentage growth. So basically anything in purple and in green makes the cut by the Bureau of Labor Statistics in terms of being a high growth and highly demanded occupation moving forward. In that same column of business and finance, purple is there, and that's accountants. And again, highly demanded today, but also projected to be one of the highest in terms of number of new jobs. Not a great surprise, computer and mathematical, they're all high growth. And that's going to include software developers, computer systems engineers, computer user support specialists. And again, if I pulled that down, that one has a whole bunch of green, right? And again, not a huge surprise probably. We have education there. You can see social workers and mental health counselors have a lot of growth. Arts, design, entertainment, sports, and media, you can see the categories there. Healthcare, and not another surprise here, a lot of purple and green nurses, nurse practitioners, medical and dental assistants, personal care aides, and so forth. Couple of categories there for protective services, food services and prep, And then, do we know where there we go. Okay, thanks. And then these are the rest of them. You're not going to see quite as many in green and in purple here, but again, you can see the categories. Building grounds maintenance, sales and related, office and admin, installation maintenance and repair, and that's where you do see automotive tech and so forth, and general maintenance and repair workers. TDL, as I called it earlier, trade distribution and logistics, truck drivers, other drivers, freight laborers, material movers. And then the last one is called construction and extraction by the Bureau of Labor Statistics, but it's basically what we think of as skilled trades. And that's, of course, construction laborers, carpenters, electricians, roofers, plumbers, and so forth, okay? So we're just trying to give you that information so that as you're filling out the survey, if you want to refer back to this, you can look at it. And I think it's going to be on your website too, right? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So next steps for us now then, with all of the information you've just gathered, we'd love to have you just work with the people at your table. If you're on the perimeter, join a table and join the discussion and just really digest everything that you've heard so far, right? Everything that you've heard about Lewis, about the Innovation Campus and how we've gotten to where we are, about the CTE programming that we offer, about the information that Dr. Bailey shared, about the economic landscape. And just kind of talk through some of the things that stood out to you. We're going to do that for about the next 15 minutes, and then we'll come back together and we'll talk about next steps. So please gather with your group. Okay, friends. If we could start kind of bringing the conversation back to a group setting, that would be well appreciated. I'd really like to recognize everyone's time tonight and end on time. I'm doing the proximity control thing that educators do with my educator friends. So walking around, it was really thrilling to hear all of the great conversation that was being had around our tables. And so I'm interested if there's anyone that would like to share any big topics that were discussed at their table, any takeaways. We won't force you, don't worry. We're not going to randomly call on you. Oh, yes. We have a student voice.
Oh, yeah, sweet, sorry. So the biggest thing that I pulled out of that, and it was touched on kind of briefly, I feel like, but the soft skills, because that's something that personally I don't think I get very much of at all in the classroom. And even like technical classes or like classes where I do a lot of group projects and stuff, I don't feel like I gain that much soft skills, and I feel like that's kind of where it's lacking right now to an extent. And that's kind of why I look at extracurriculars that I can get those soft skills in, because that's what's beneficial to me.
Great, thank you so much. We're excited about the portrait of a graduate because we actually did a crosswalk between the slides that Dr. Bailey showed about soft skills and how they line with that product. So we're going to launch into that work. Thank you so much. Do you want my microphone?
Thank you for mentioning those soft skills. We were talking about that here with, of course, not the student, but we have adults, children who are adults now, and talking about the soft skills that they need, and kids today saying, you know, understanding they have to clean themselves up, not wear their sweats when they go to talk to somebody about a job, and alarmed that my two daughters who have advanced degrees, one of them addressed an envelope, and I was like, what are you thinking? You gotta leave room for a return address and a stamp. Things that we forget because the older of us in this room, at least, spend that time writing a pen pals and doing little things like that that are little, but are huge now because everything's automated. And the communication skills, you know, instead of sending an emoji, they actually have to write out how they're feeling and think about how they're feeling and how to explain it. And those soft skills we talked about as well.
Awesome, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yes. There's so many, this is exciting.
This actually is directed towards Brett, who is a gem, who's a wonderful resource and chief financial officer. I just wanted to say that because you are a valuable asset to this district. No doubt about it.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, that's $20. Come on, pony up. My question is kind of related to that, is that there is on the who, what, where, and why a bullet that says there is a re-ranking of the existing maintenance projects. Now, we have a lot of deferred maintenance projects to the tune of above, I suspect, $20 million. I'm interested if you can share the process to re-rank all of the existing deferred maintenance with the benefits of CTE.
So that's a really great question, and I think it's an important one to be discussed. We're going to put in the parking lot for today so that we can follow back up with you when we're more prepared for that, and maybe when we have a little bit more time. That's a great question, though. Who else has questions?
We'll start here.
Hi, again, thanks for a tremendous amount of information. The thing that I brought up here, and we got a lot of discussion about, of course, is several others have mentioned already, the importance of soft skills. But I was a little bit confused towards the end of the presentation about the, potential targets for this educational opportunity. I didn't find a real strong match between the targets that I saw up there on the screen and current programs that are outstanding in D38. Anybody who knows me knows one of those targets, but it's not the only one that I have in mind. Would definitely like a lot more clarification on that, which raised another question I believe deserves a lot of clarification in the plans, and I know this is an emerging process. Is the full purpose here simply post-secondary preparation? Heard a lot about that, and I understand that. Or is it future preparation? The difference to me between those two things is future preparation serves both that need, and students are going to continue through the educational process and become, fill those super high value, leadership jobs in the future. I want to see a lot of service to that goal also in these plans. I would argue that that's what's necessary for this really to be called an innovation center.
Yep.
But
so the good news is, and you used a really important word in that question, and that is emerging, right? That is why we're here tonight, is to really look at the data and for you to have an opportunity to inform us of what you see and what your preferences might be based off of the data. So thank you for that. This isn't the end of the conversation either. What you'll see in just a little while is that in that survey, we're going to be asking for people to sit on a task force to continue the conversation. So Mike, I hope you consider that. I think we have time for maybe one or two more. Yeah, I know. Okay. Amy's coming around.
I'm going to go here first. Want to do two more?
Hello there. I'm Bob Gimignani with the Pikes Peak Business and Education Alliance. The first thing I wanted to say is I wonder if there's some friendly competition between D38 and D49, because I'm seeing all kinds of staff from D49 here that we used to work with. So that's really cool. So Jess, with regard to the plan and the innovation campus and all that stuff, some of the research that we've been exposed to sort of reveals like a counseling deficit of staff to do career development interventions with students. We were on a call a couple of years ago with like the National School Counseling Association, and the average amount of time that a counselor was spending with an individual student in high school was 8 minutes over 4 years. So has your group given any thought to the human intervention, the meaningful career conversations that you can have with students to attract them into these pathways?
I am so glad you asked that, Bob. A couple of years ago, we went for something called School Counselor Core Grant for just that purpose, post-secondary counselors, and we have expanded our staff at the middle school and both high schools for just that purpose. So not only are we we're just planning to continue the good work that we've already put in motion. So thanks. One more. I hate having to cut people off, but yes.
It's slide 46. I don't know if you can get back there, but it was the Lewis Palmer data slide, and it was that one. And the green chunk in the middle was really surprising to me, at least. Interesting. That the aptitude seems significantly higher statistically than the interest level for engineering. I don't know if I'm reading that right, but
You are, yeah.
that's a big opportunity. Yeah, that's a big opportunity. So that's exciting. And question is, this is a national data point for later?
Okay.
Or is this because we have such an aerospace kind of engineering, Air Force kind of
I think that's
around
worth
here?
looking into, and I would be interested to see of our constituents,
good news.
right? Whose families are in the workforce, who's been exposed to this kind of work. But yeah, thank you for calling that out. The engineering, technology, and media band also includes digital media and some marketing and stuff like that. But yeah, I agree. That does stand out. So I thank you all so much. If there's a burning question or comment that you'd like to make, we'll be here till after this. So please come up and speak with one of us. But in the interest of time, we're going to go ahead and move on. So we've so far been talking just a lot about data, CTE programming, what's happening in the economy, and now we're going to kind of bring us back to where this conversation started about an innovation center, because that's really what we are hoping to get from you today, is an entry into a survey to help share with us some of what you're thinking and what you walked away with. But before we do, I'd like to share with you some of the things that we know about the future Innovation Campus. And this is from what we've learned from the tours that we've gone on. we are really feeling like we'd like to emulate what we've seen success in other school districts, and that is to welcome in students who have kind of gotten into the higher level courses. So CTE courses always have a course progression. There's a level 1, a level 2, a level 3, and a level 4. Level 1 and 2, you can kind of see in lighter purple shades. Those are really beginner courses. The samples that you can see up there have the word intro in front of several of them, right? And then level 2, those are usually just kind of developing those skills. You'll see words like principles and foundations in front of those words. It's when students start to go further into these paths and deeper into their learning where they get into level 3 and level 4 courses. And that is where the need for specialized equipment really comes into play. That's where the need for that higher electricity that I talked about earlier, right? The ventilation, the ceilings, just the landscape changes for us to be able to deliver that programming well. So we are hoping to emulate this. And in doing so, we are hoping that the schedule will really entail students coming for part of their day, right? We are not planning for this to be a school. It is going to be a program. So students who participate in this Innovation Campus will leave their regular school for part of the day. They will attend classes at this place, and then they will go back to that place. A good model that we have is Career Start. I mentioned that earlier. It's just a lot closer, which will be really, really nice. So they will be double blocked. There will be a morning block where students will come in, and then they will go back to their campus, and another flow of students coming in the afternoon will happen. So that's kind of overarching what we've seen success in when we've gone on all of those tours and had the conversations that we've had. And we've had an opportunity to really kind of beta test some of this through something that we've started this year called the D38 Student Enterprise. Amber mentioned a little bit about earlier. So just last year, we were awarded an Innovations in CTE grant where we have several pieces of equipment that we were able to install. And the whole idea around it is that students will be working on this equipment to create specialized products, apparel, and printing services. And so in that beta testing in this past year, we've gotten to really play around with some unique scheduling, some staffing, transportation, health services, nutrition services, and security. We plan to keep doing that this year and expanding that just a little bit so we can continue to learn those lessons of any potential barriers that might happen, especially when we're starting to have and offer programming outside of a school campus. So those are the things that we know. These are the things that we're still learning. And now what we'd like to do is get into that survey here in just a moment so that you can tell us what your perceptions are. Before we do, and I mentioned it just a moment ago, we are going to be assembling a design advisory committee. And that design advisory committee will be meeting at 5:30 to 7, this exact time, likely at this exact location, at the dates you see listed on the screen. So if you'd like to be a part of that design advisory committee, inside of the survey, you'll have an opportunity to sign up for that as well. So, without further ado, here's the QR to that survey. Once we're finished with this, we just thank you so much for your time. You are free to continue the conversation if you'd like, but there's really no more presentation after this. So thank you all for coming.